Javier.
Good morning. Thank you, Natalie. Appreciate you so much. Joyceanata District 3, the Rules Committee. Areas of responsibility include the Rules of Council, committee composition and responsibilities. I had 6 pages, 6, written on my topic for this morning. I threw out 5 of them and saved the last page on this topic. Okay, I'll read I will do my best to speak from my heart and my head. First, my last page that I saved. I respect and honor the position and the work of all council members, and I honor the flow of all meetings. Yet, as a public, accountability and transparency are vitally important to me. So thank you for listening. First of all, I want to say to, running out of time already, I want to say to Council Member Dr. Campbell, I miss you, I love you, I'm sending thoughts of well-being to you. Where are you? We want to know, we deserve to know. Now, I know we can't know certain things ever, but we need to have you say something. We love her, we miss her, it's her job. Okay? It's not complicated. And so, is that my time?
Thank you. Yes, that was your time.
Love to all.
Thank you, Cesar Javier. We will distribute those. You can set them down. Thank you. Please begin.
Morning. Good morning. We need help to abate a home-based business, home occupation in ceramics manufacturing, and kiln operation located at 5238 Streamview Drive, District 9, City of San Diego since 1984. In parentheses, Exhibit 1, Business Tax Information Form. The home-based kiln operation had been a potential harm to human and environment as vulnerable residents in every close proximity to the kiln operation, our medical symptoms, myself, now and Javier, are sneezing, coughing, eye irritation, sore throat, difficulty breathing, dizziness, unusual headaches, heart palpitation, anxiety, fear, and depression. We were hospitalized related to toxic fumes from the kiln operation. In parentheses, Exhibit 2, health notes from medical providers. The poisonous gases and airborne toxic particulates inhaled or possibly ingested from kiln operation may lead to respiratory problems such as asthma, pneumonia, and lung cancer. Exhibit 3, Princeton University Environmental Health Safety.
Cesar Javier, celebrating Hispanic heritage. Filipino Americans have a flavor of this cultural Hispanic landscape, if I may say that. And I always smile with Madam Moreno expressing her support for this celebration, including, of course, the Nicaraguan American revered homeowners association, supposed to be in our depressed community. My question, my first question, Madam Attorney, when are you going to say to them, please discuss the matter, life and death matter, community issue, neighborhood issue, environmental issue, as described by Honorable Lakawa, my fellow Hispanic of Heritage. I met him during the San Diego 350 in 2022, first week. We celebrate Environmental Day. I remember this because I am a consistent student of this University of Life. I know you all now. And I am expressing from my heart too, and my humble intellectual cognitive ability to say, stop. Be honest and wise. You come and go, but our issue remains, if unsolved. You solve it now, so it would not accumulate more decision-making process. Let's be honest. I expect that the Honorable District 9 will be coming out, going out, ejected, thrown out. Forgive me, but I'm just telling the truth. We need new leadership. We need changes for good. We need delivery of more public goods.
Thank you. This does conclude your time, and this concludes in-person public testimony for non-agenda public comment. We will move to the virtual queue, and I've started the 5-minute timer. We currently have 6 hands raised in the virtual queue. We will begin with Madison. Madison, please begin your comments.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, Rules Committee and Chair Ela Rivera. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the critical intersection of cannabis regulation, public safety, and community awareness. Recent enforcement actions by California's Unified Cannabis Enforcement Task Force highlight an urgent issue: the illegal cannabis market and its associated dangers. In a significant operation in Oakland, authorities recently seized over $2.3 million in illegally cultivated cannabis and harmful pesticides. These actions underscore not only the necessity of strong regulations, but also the vital role of effective public communication. Our existing laws, including the Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use of Marijuana Act, set clear boundaries to protect consumers and the environment. However, illegal operations continue to flourish, often because the community is not fully aware of the risks involved or the regulations in place. To combat this, I urge the committee to consider the following key strategies. Number 1, strengthen public awareness campaigns. We need to proactively inform our community about the dangers of illegal cannabis operations. This includes educating residents on how to identify and report suspicious activities. Informative materials should be distributed through schools, community centers, and social media, ensuring that everyone knows the risks of unregulated cannabis. And number 2, transparent communication on regulations. Regularly update the community on our cannabis regulations, including any changes or enhancements. This transparency fosters trust and encourages compliance. Creating easy-to-understand guides about what constitutes legal cannabis operations can empower residents to make informed choices. In conclusion, strengthening our cannabis regulations while enhancing public communication will not only protect our residents, but also foster a responsible and informed cannabis market. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is phone number ending in 7234. Please press *6, phone number ending in 7234.
Good morning, Rules Committee Chair Ela Rivera. My name is Terry Ann Skelly. I'm a community volunteer with youth mentoring programs, and I attend my local planning group. Rules matter, and I appreciate your service on the Rules Committee. Our young people need protections that come from the carefully considered, thoughtful, and enforced municipal code language that protects their safety and health now more than ever. I wanted to bring to your attention AB 1498 that the governor just signed into law. AB 1498 imposes vigorous advertising requirements on hemp manufacturers, distributors, or sellers, prohibiting advertising or marketing to children or to persons who are pregnant or breastfeeding. This bill brings to my attention how worthwhile it would be to have a report from code enforcement or San Diego Police Department regarding the recent scrutiny and enforcement activities around the many smoke shops around San Diego who are selling hemp products. Some of the most aggressive and egregious smoke shops are in our communities of color. Perhaps enforcement activities could begin there if it hasn't already happened. It's important to remember regarding hemp products that recent state assessments indicate that hemp is being engineered to increase its THC content to dangerous levels similar to marijuana products. Thank you, Rules Committee, for your consideration regarding the importance to the public to know how San Diego and the state laws that affect children are really being enforced. Thank you for hearing my concerns this morning.
Thank you. Our next speaker in the queue is Becky Rapp. Please begin.
Good morning, Rules Committee. My name is Becky Rapp. I'm a parent and a public health educator, and today I wanted to remind you about a recent UT article titled UK Lawmakers Back Landmark Bill to Gradually Phase Out Smoking for Good. This article describes how important rules and policies are to improve public health. The British government plans to implement a smoking ban aimed at stopping young people from ever smoking. It would become illegal to sell tobacco products to anyone born after January 2009, creating the strongest smoking measures in the world in efforts of creating a smoke-free generation. The bill also includes measures to crack down on youth vaping by banning the sale of cheap, disposable vapes and restricting flavors specifically aimed at the targeting of children. I'm grateful San Diego already recognizes the great harm these products pose to our young people by voting to implement a policy banning the sale of flavored vape products. This was a huge step in the right direction, setting rules in place that protect public health. I ask you now to consider revisiting the topic, looking for ways to further the goals and priorities set by this council in protecting youth from the sale of tobacco products. How can we create a smoke-free generation here in San Diego, continuing to push back on the false narrative sent by the tobacco industry, creating improved health and well-being for our young people? Thank you.
Thank you. And the 5-minute timer has concluded. We have 3 hands remaining in the virtual queue. We will take no additional callers after these 3. The original, please begin.
Speaking of public health, you should be listening to Cesar and Rita Javier and their concerns about what is happening in their neighborhood. They come to you guys all the time and let you know the health effects that they have endured due to, zoning regulations that are in place for ceramics manufacturing. And, you sit up there and you say that you want, to protect the health and safety of the community. But yet, people can come and talk to you guys and share information with you, and you kind of just brush it aside. It should be a concern when we are, changing a lot of the zoning to put in housing and work in your, climate action plan to, put people in different types of zones for housing and mixing it with, whether it's commercial or industrial, different things like that. There were reasons set in place as to why these things shouldn't be going on, and they are a clear example of that. Yet, they come and they voice their concerns repeatedly, over and over, and nobody ever says, they would like to talk to them, that, your office is open to them so that you can hear their concerns and really just get down to the bottom of what is happening. So it's very sad when you can sit up there and claim certain things, but then you absolutely ignore and negate the facts right in front of you. So I would encourage you to listen to this couple and take in their concerns as though it was one of your family members and actually try to mitigate it instead of ignoring it. Because the more you ignore it, the worse it gets. And with all of the changes in zoning, you need to understand that there are consequences to the actions that you guys take.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Peggy Walker. Please begin.
Thank you. Good morning. Last week, a National Academy of Sciences report by some of the nation's leading scientists was released with profound implications regarding the impact of commercial cannabis. It warned that prioritizing marijuana sales and tax revenue over personal well-being has put public health at serious risk, especially that of youth. This echoes what prevention, medical, and treatment communities have been warning, that cannabis commercialization is linked to upticks in costly medical emergencies, hospitalizations, mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness issues and suicides. And it brings to question whether the economic benefits of marijuana justify the heavy medical and social costs. Much of this is related to shameless and illegal marketing of cannabis products to youth. Much of this marketing is a result of poorly enforced regulations and an industry that chooses to ignore the rules and regulations. As others have stated, we need strong municipal code restrictions on illegal advertising and marketing of cannabis products directed to kids and the illegal sale of highly potent hemp products at local convenience stores. If apples were sickening and poisoning and hospitalizing young people, they'd be pulled in 5 minutes. We need to do the same with illegal cannabis marketing and promotion. I ask this Rules Committee to investigate where the marijuana industry is ignoring regulations and rules in terms of illegal marketing and promotion that is directed specifically to youth and young people. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker in the queue is Judy Strang. Please begin. Judy Strang. Please unmute and begin your comments. Judy Strang.
And redress you guys. And, when you're cutting down people in their time, when it's such an important topic, but then you guys go off for 20 minutes sometimes while you're shutting the people down to 1 minute. It just is proof that you don't really want to hear from the people, because people are suffering. And anytime it has to do with the suffering of the community, you tend to silence the people that should be able to have the opportunity to make sure that you understand fully what's going on, especially when you don't even take time to meet with people and do your job and make sure that your communities are safe and taken care of. It's just really sad to see that you're very good at silencing the people while saying and touting that you want to hear from them and that you actually care.
Thank you. And this concludes public testimony on the consent agenda.
All right, thank you so much, Natalie. Do we have any questions or comments or a motion to approve?
Move approve. Oh, go ahead. I'll move approval to consent.
All right, we've got a motion. We've got a second. Great. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No, nobody opposed. That passes unanimously with 4 votes in favor, 0 votes opposed, and Councilmember Campillo absent. All right, Natalie, let's hear our next item, please.
Thank you. Item number 2, amendments to the municipal code regarding administrative fines assessed by the Ethics Commission. If you're watching on City TV or the live stream online and would like to call into the meeting to speak to item 2, please call 1-669-254-5252. When prompted, the webinar ID is 160-549-8117#.
All right, Ms. Spivak, if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record and let us know how much time you'd like for this presentation.
Thank you, Council President. For those who don't know me, I'm Sharon Spivak. I'm the Executive Director of the City Ethics Commission. My presentation will be about 10 to 12 minutes, but I promise to go through it briskly. The point is to give you as much context as I can to explain to both the Council, but also to the public, the need for the legislative amendments before you today.
Please
So,
proceed.
With that, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present this item. Before I go any further, I'd like to introduce my staff who's with us today. To my left is Megan Curran, who is our Legislative Program Manager at the Ethics Commission. And online is Christina Gagne, who is our Investigative Program Manager. And the three of us are three of the 6 members of the Small But Mighty Ethics Commission. And we are the 3 attorneys who work on the enforcement program. And what I'd like to do before we get started is I'm going to give you a little bit of a roadmap for my short presentation to tell you where we're going and welcome your questions. The first thing I'm going to do for the benefit of the public is just talk a bit about who we are and what we do. Second, the proposal before you. And third, probably the most important part, to give the council and the public the context for how enforcement fines work and are set by our office. And then finally, why we need these amendments. So with that, just a brief slide on what we do. The Ethics Commission, as I noted, is a 6-person city department that has the very significant purpose of enforcing violations of the city's ethics, lobbying, and campaign laws. We do a lot with a little. Our jurisdiction spans inside and outside of City Hall. We regulate the conduct of high-level city employees, elected officials, candidates, campaigns, campaign donors, registered lobbyists, and more. With that, we have enforcement tools that are set out in the municipal code, and we are limited right now to imposing an enforcement fine of up to, and the up to is important because no 2 cases are the same, $5,000 per violation. As I'll speak to this today, I'll explain and underscore why that $5,000 per violation fine no longer meets enforcement needs. Enforcement fines need to be set at a level that deters wrongful conduct. That's the theme today, which is why I've got it in bold print for you. Because what do fines do? They operate to deter misconduct with goals of preventing government corruption, enhancing transparency by ensuring parties properly report and detail everything from their economic interests to their lobbying contacts and their campaign activities, how money is spent and raised, and strengthening trust in city government. And our department needs enforcement tools to make sure people are staying within the bounds of that. It's important to note at the outset that the vast majority of the people we regulate do stay within the lines, but our tools are necessary when things go into a complaint and an enforcement action. So with that, let me first go over what the proposal is, and then I will backtrack into how fines are set. What we're proposing to do today is to amend a single section of the municipal code that deals with enforcement fines. And here's what it would say. For each violation of governmental ethics laws, the commission may impose either of the following. And I want to note at the outset that both of these will provide ranges. There's not a set formula because every case is different. But the commission will, after this legislation, be able to impose either of the following based on the commission's assessment of the severity of the violation. So per count, the commission can either impose a fine of up to $15,000 or employ a treble damages provision. I'll take each of these separately. The fine that we wish to change, the limit to the fines that we wish to change would be changing it to up to $15,000 from the current $5,000. The $5,000 limit was set in 2002. This is a 22-year-old law that has never been amended. It no longer serves deterrence needs in some cases, and it is no longer best practices, as I'll explain in an additional slide. Second, we'd like to add a treble damages provision, and we are the only ethics commission of the big city 4 ethics commissions in the state of California that does not have this. That has been a real setback for our office when we have a case of egregious misconduct because we are limited to the $5,000 cap and we can't do anything to treble damages. Now that trebling would only be reserved for certain cases and only cases that involve the following facts. Amounts that the respondent failed to properly report or unlawfully contributed, expended, gave, or received. And again, that is a range. It doesn't mean that you would impose the entire trebling. To do so might be unreasonable in a given matter, but it does give us enforcement tools. With that, I'd like to spend 2 slides just talking about how we set fines, because the limit that we're talking about today is not something that's just given to commission staff to set. There is a very specific and detailed and robust process for how fines are set. So to explain, The first thing that happens is the commission's enforcement staff, and those are the attorneys, all of us who work on enforcement matters, we set an initial amount by looking at comparable cases from this city, from the California Fair Political Practices Commission, which, as you know, is sort of the mothership, the state agency that regulates the same types of conduct, and other California jurisdictions. And that's when we're looking to our, what I call our sister commissions in LA, San Francisco, and Oakland to see how they have handled similar cases. Then, as every case is, we have to consider the factors of the case, and they're going to widely vary. We're going to look at the severity of the violation. Was it intentional misconduct? Was the respondent cooperative when we opened our investigation? Was this a first-time candidate? Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse, but we will take into account the sophistication and whether people have done this before. There are a lot of aggravating circumstances, and there's a lot of mitigating circumstances that lead us to analyze this for an initial fine. Our investigations are confidential by law, so I have to be careful on what I can say. However, my screen, something's happening on my screen, sorry. Thank you. Negotiated settlements approved by the commission staff and those that go into a stipulation are on the website. So they will be up for the public, and the idea is that that in itself will give publicity that will serve as a deterrent. So the ones that are public are the ones where we've negotiated a settlement, and you will see those. Fines are not just set, though, by commission staff, and this is critical to the analysis. There's an elaborate checks and balances system. So we look at that municipal code authority. We have to set within that range that we're talking about today. We consider the facts, as I was just talking about, because they're all unique. We negotiate with the respondent to come up with the right amount. And then if, in fact, we have a settlement and it is in a stipulation and we have the check in our hand, it's important, we don't go to the board till we have the check. Then we go to the commission board, and it is the commission board in closed session that must approve or reject the fine. So the board is the backstop on what has already been negotiated. If we can't reach a settlement, the important thing is that the respondent always has a right to an administrative hearing and can appeal the result of that to the Superior Court. And for those of you on the council who've heard me talk about hearings, that's where that hearing comes in. We don't know in a given year when we're asking for budget if someone will ask for a hearing and what that will cost. And that's that money that we hold in reserve because the respondent is always entitled to a hearing. With that in mind, let me talk about the issues and why we're here on the prongs of the enforcement that we're asking about today. Best practices and inflation both factor into our request for an increase to the cap on the fine. So that $5,000 limit is no longer sufficient for deterrence in the opinion of the Ethics Commission. We know from some of the cases that have been well publicized that some people think a $5,000 fine is a cost of doing business, and they would rather just wait to file disclosures or give information that's important for transparency and for the public till after the fact and then take the hit on the fine. It's not enough for some of the corporate entities that we are fining, in my opinion. As you know, we've had some cases against well-funded private lobbyists or those behind campaign committees, and taking the fine and then not disclosing things weakens and undermines our ability to hold people accountable. The larger fines, the hope is, will serve as a more effective deterrent against these types of violations. People will think twice about their conduct. Now, what's $15,000, because this is exactly, and the wording is the same, what is being proposed for Los Angeles. And Los Angeles hopes to have a $15,000 fine limit in place at the end of the year. Second, inflation, and I've spoken with the IBA's office about this, and accounting for inflation alone, that $5,000 that was set in 2002 would be $8,700 today. So it's not serving the same effect. Now, moving on to treble damages, I mentioned at the outset, we're the only ones who don't have this. It is important for its deterrent effect, and this is for the egregious cases. There are cases that warrant a trebling. We look at whether conduct is intentional. We look at the factors involved, and every case will be different. But also it is limited by only being reserved for cases where someone failed to properly report or unlawfully contributed, expended, gave, or received a monetary amount. So these are money cases. So let me give you an example, which I put on this slide. In my hypothetical example, a prominent lobbying firm intentionally did not disclose a $100,000 contribution made to a committee primarily formed to support the reelection of a city official. Right now, our maximum fine is $5,000. That's it. Single count, that's all we can do. If we treble the damages, we would be able to impose a fine of up to 3 times the amount not reported. Now, rest assured, we're not imposing a $300,000 fine on that. But what it does is it gives the commission flexibility to set an amount that is reasonable and deterring and setting an example for others not to engage in similar conduct. So it is giving flexibility to the commission. Now, some have asked, and I spoke with the IBA's office about this, why do we need both? We need both because trebling will not be available in all cases, and there will still be cases where $5,000 will not be sufficient to provide deterrence. So I provide an example of that here. This case involves an advertising disclosure. And, we're in an election season. Everyone's familiar with these. We do look a lot at campaign literature and whether it says who paid for an ad. So in this hypothetical example, a committee was discovered to have mailers that were sent supporting a candidate that didn't include the required ad paid for by disclosure. The investigation, though, that the commission does reveals this was done knowingly and intentionally because they wanted to hide the voter's identity from the public. In that case, treble damages would not be available because this is not about a monetary amount that wasn't reported or spent or received or a donation. It's about ad disclosure, but we would be limited to $5,000. Because of the level of misconduct, though, we would want the flexibility to have a bigger fine, and that's where that $15,000 becomes important. Finally, we have a best practices provision in here, which is similar to what Los Angeles also has, and more importantly, similar to what the municipal code has right now for campaign contribution limits. I know you're all familiar with that, which is a CPI adjustment. And that's a best practices prong of this legislation, which ensures that we don't have to keep coming back to you to increase fines to ensure that they remain an effective deterrent. So we've worked with the city attorney's office on this language to make sure it's just right. The maximum amount would be adjusted in even numbered years to reflect any CPI changes rounded to the nearest $50. And with that, we respectfully request that the amendments be advanced to the full council. We can't underscore enough that these tools are significant and important. This provision, again, has not been changed for 22 years. This would bring us in line with the practices of other large city California Ethics Commission, allow for the adjustment for inflation. Significantly, this was discussed at 4 public meetings of the Ethics Commission. The city attorney included this in her reform package. We have been working with that office. We've already drafted an ordinance, which we would have ready for council. And the strikeout before you has already been vetted and approved by the city attorney's office. I also believe she gave you a memo explaining her support. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Spivak. Let's hear public comment, please.
Thank you, Council President. The public comment period for item 2 is now open, and we have received 2 speaker slips from individuals in chambers. We will take these 2 before we move to the virtual queue. Joyce and Yada, please approach the lectern, and you'll be followed by Cesar Javier.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Joyce and Yada, District 3. Wow, great presentation. And I want to admit this, in 17 years, I have never spoken on this item or any related items. So I'm a rookie. So here we go. 22 years from the last fine increase. Yes, this is an effective deterrent against ethics violations of the city's ethics and so forth. Yes, to $15,000 cap. Yes, to every 2 years. Yes, to treble damages provision, 3 times the multiplier. Now, here's where you need to cut me some slack, because I think everything you said, I listened very closely. I think answered this question, but I'm still confused, so I have to work on this. Treble damages provision. As a legal remedy, other than 3 times, is there a legal entity higher than the SD Commission that sets the compensatory damages attached to the 3 times multiplier? is that amount always set, or is that amount always set by the Ethics Commission? So 22 years with low deterrence, not good. 22 years of loss of fines, revenue, not good. Thank you to all involved with ethics, so critical. Thank you so much. And thanks for these amendments. I know you'll approve them. I hope you will. Thanks for listening and love to all. Great work. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. Cesar Javier, please approach the lectern.
Cesar Javier. Payback time, Uncle Sam. Thank you for this 12 minutes lecture. And for an aging person, it's really difficult to absorb. But I have 2 pointers here. I am in the continuum to say my piece, whether it is good, bad, or ugly. Money is not a deterrence. I had research on that. Poverty, criminality, illiteracy are strongly correlated. If we base on that, and you say money is the savior of this criminality or felony, it will not solve. If you punish the doer, the violation committed, or the person, for example, during our neighborhood community meeting, Honorable Rivera said to the public, I do not use milk from the cows for my campaign. There is reason to believe that there is already a commission we call ethics violation. That's only an example. I don't mean anything here. I only mean that money is not a deterrence because wealthy people can throw millions of money to protect themselves. They can hire the best lawyers. We have 700 lawyers right here in San Diego region. Please.
Thank you for that concluding remark. This does conclude your time, and we will now move to the virtual queue. I've started the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate that they wish to speak to item 2. We have 1 hand raised. The original, please begin. You'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is interesting. I totally wonder how you guys are going to vote on this because, I mean, if you're going to be set to, have fines, are you actually going to approve it? But Cesar is right. It is good to you need something more to enforce this because people do have a lot of money, especially people or they have friends who have money. Even the ones that gave them the money that could potentially have been the violation in this. So, I think $15,000 is a start, and the treble damages, but I think you should also think about if you really do want people to stop engaging in that kind of activity and behaviors, and it is a violation of the law, there should be a heavier, sentence or whatever that is brought down, a heavier consequence. And because if people do have a lot of money and if $15,000 is a drop in the bucket for them, just like the $5,000 was, are they really going to be deterred from doing it? Especially if they do have friends as well that can come in and pay the bill for them by just giving them the money and then they can write the check. I think that we need to just really ensure that this kind of behaviors aren't going to take place because they do all the time. And nothing really happens to the people, so they do it again. And, if you do want to deter it, and there was a steeper consequence to it, like, I don't know, maybe even community service or, some jail time. I mean, I've been put in jail for coming to a community meeting, just in speaking, using my First Amendment right. So if that can happen, then I would suggest it happens to those in violation of this kind of stuff so that it is equitable and it does stop.
Thank you. And this concludes public comment on item 2.
All right, I will turn to Council President Pro Tem LaCava to kick things off.
All right, thank you, Council President. I'm going to start out by thanking you, Ms. Spivak, and your staff and the commissioners for your help in putting the ballot measure together that changes the language of the Ethics Commission in the charter. So I appreciate that extra work. And you did give us a heads up that Muni Code changes would be coming our way, and here we are. You know, to me, this is really a matter of good governance and going through in the unpleasant task of digging through our policies and our Muni Code to say, oh my gosh, we haven't looked at this in too many years, and we didn't have any kind of escalators that should have really tracked the cost of things. And so I'm going to be supportive of this. As an engineer, I would quibble about rounding to the nearest $50. I don't want to see the, 2 years from now, the fine is $16,150 max. I don't know if there was a reason for the rounding of $50. I don't want to make a big deal about it, but.
It was language we found elsewhere.
But it's okay. Just more numbers for you to think about. The only other thought that I wanted to interject is your example about an ad that violated rules. I still think there's a way to attach a dollar amount to that. So if I make a $10,000 contribution and don't disclose it, that's very, very obvious. But if I prepare a mailer that cost me $10,000 to send out, there's a dollar amount there that you could work with. That's not in the action today, but I just kind of float that idea out there.
And if I may, every fact and every situation is going to be different, and we're going to be looking at all of it, but there's a specific wording, and we were just trying to give you an example today,
Okay.
that there is a gap between the limit and the trebling that we needed to fill. And we will take all facts and circumstances into consideration to make sure that it fits the appropriate definition.
All right, fair enough. I appreciate that, and thank you for that clarification. So with that, I'll close my comments by moving the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. We've got a motion to approve the recommendation here. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Council President. I'll go ahead and second the motion, and thank you, Sharon, and your team for your work on this item. A lot of it really also looking at some of the best practices from other areas and getting a chance to sort of align that with what we have as a practice here. I think just recognizing that we are facing decades of having not made changes, it would seem to only make sense that we have a structure and policy that better aligns with what we might see elsewhere. Certainly, I think, as you said, helps to provide some teeth when it comes to enforcement. And then I would just say thanks for reminding us again as well about the budgetary impacts, even when we were thinking of administrative hearings. And as we look forward, knowing that your work requires the support that's necessary to ensure that it takes place. Look forward to seeing how we can continue to help you carry that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. All right, we have a motion and a second. Thank you for bringing this forward. I think this is important. We need to make sure there's accountability for those who violate our ethics rules. And I think even more important, we want to make sure that those rules aren't violated to begin with. And certainly the penalties that folks pay plays a role in that. I do appreciate you pointing out, the cost of business analysis that some bad actors do when making their plans for how they're going to engage in the election cycle. That is certainly something that we need to keep in mind. The one question I have is to what extent we factor in, so there's the big, well-financed bad actors, and then there are grassroots candidates or younger and more diverse candidates who could potentially be scared out of running for fear of the financial penalties that could come with making a misstep in a campaign. So can you speak to how that analysis is done and how we avoid a chilling effect on a more representative group of candidates?
Yes, there's two factors here. So the first thing I want to talk about, which it wasn't personally like in these slides, but it's very, very important, and all of you know about this, is we do extensive training. Anytime anyone runs for office, we are working with the clerk's office to get their names, get their contacts, get their campaign staff, or even if it's just a grassroots candidate who has no staff, we reach out to them to give them training on the laws that affect their campaigns. So the first thing is the educational program that we run, which is a separate program of our office, and we're very proud of that. We do everything we can to make sure people are educated on the laws, and I know the city clerk's office works on that as well. So we assume they've had some training, but we do take into account when someone is a first-time candidate. They don't have any structure. As I said earlier, ignorance is not an excuse, but their level of sophistication or their entry into a campaign when they've never done it before, those things are always taken into account. And a lot of what we will do in some of these enforcement matters, if they're more minor, is we will agree to give them education, and we will enhance their education or give them another round of it as the punishment, so to speak. Another just important kind of side note, because of some of the questions we got in the audience, we are a civil administrative agency. So if anything ever rises to the level of criminal misconduct, that's when we have to refer it to the district attorney. So we are just dealing with civil penalties here. And hopefully that answers your question. But all facts taken into account do include whether someone is new at this, whether they're not a sophisticated actor, and we look at whether they've done it before. Every stipulation we have has a paragraph in it saying, this is what the fine is this time, but please know that if this recurs, it will be different.
I appreciate that. And then this is more of a kind of thinking forward. Has there been an analysis or any work with the IBA on fiscal and operational impact of these changes?
It won't have a fiscal and operational impact on us. It'll just give us better tools. But the important thing is that all fines collected go to the general fund. So there would potentially be a corresponding increase of money into the general fund. We don't set our budget based on fines, and the fines are never included in our department budget. We track them very closely. We put them all in our annual report. They're online. The stipulations are online, but the money that comes in is outside of our department.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the thought you've put into this. Again, it is important. We want to make sure that the penalties are keeping up with the times, and that we are, as much as possible, deterring bad actors from trying to unfairly put their finger on the scale of elections. So thank you for this. Certainly supportive. We've got a motion from Council President Pro Tem LaCava, seconded by Councilmember Lee. Natalie, if you'd like to call the roll.
And the motion for item 2 passes 4-0 with Committee Member Campillo absent.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's hear our next item, please.
Item number 3, presentation from the Funds Commission, Council Policy 000-26. If you're watching on City TV or the live stream online and would like to call into the meeting to speak to item 3, please call 1-669-254-5252. When prompted, input webinar ID 160-549-8117#.
Thank you, Natalie. All right, once our presenters are ready, please introduce yourself for the record and let us know how much time you'd like for your presentation.
Good morning, Committee Chair Elo Rivera and committee members. My name is Jeremy Shortis, Office of the City Treasurer's Accounting Program Manager. I am also the Office of Boards and Commissions Liaison to the Funds Commission. Our presentation today will take approximately 15 minutes. Presenting the majority of the slides today is Vice Chair, Funds Commission, Mr. John Peel. Mr. Peel is a financial advisor and owner of Peel Financial Services. He's been serving on the commission since 2014. Mr. Peel, we thank you so much for your continued service to the City of San Diego and the Funds Commission. Also presenting today are Ms. Allison Bonney and Mr. Jeff Knipp. They are virtual. Ms. Bonney is a Senior Portfolio Manager for Northern Trust and serves as the Investment Advisor for the Mount Hope Cemetery Perpetuity Fund. And Mr. Knipp is a Senior Vice President for Siegel Marco Advisors and is the Investment Advisor for the remaining funds under the Funds Commission's jurisdiction. Additionally, I want to thank representatives from Parks and Recreation and Library Departments for attending this meeting virtually, and they will be available to assist with any operational questions that the committee members may have today. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Peel to provide an overview of the funds.
Thank you. In today's presentation, we will be providing some background information regarding the Funds Commission, an overview of the various funds supervised by the Commission, as well as the investment performance of the funds. The Funds Commission was established by City Charter Section 41A, which states in part that the Commission shall have supervision and control over the trust, perpetuity, and investment funds of the city, as shall be placed in its custody. The membership of the Commission consists of 1 bank official and 2 unclassified citizens, and the city attorney and city treasurer. There are a total of 7 trust funds that are overseen by the Commission. There are 2 separate investment policies, one for the Mount Hope Cemetery Perpetuity Fund, which must adhere to specific investment requirements as outlined in the city charter, and 1 investment policy for all other funds. Each fund is for a specified use. We will cover each of these funds in the slides that follow. As I mentioned, the Mount Hope Cemetery Perpetuity Fund must adhere to specific investment requirements and therefore has its own unique policy. The remaining funds, which are listed on this slide, are guided by the same investment policy. The policy is a long-term investment strategy which incorporates both capital appreciation and income with a target asset allocation of 65% stocks, 35% bonds. Next, we will cover the fund's specified use. First, we have the Edwin A. Benjamin Memorial Fund, which was transferred to the Funds Commission in 1964. The funds are exclusively for the benefit of the Benjamin Memorial Branch Library, which is located in Allied Gardens. The funds are to be used to improve library resources, services, and construction or improvement of the building. This fund does not have regular distributions. The next fund is the F.E.E. Sargent Memorial Fund, which was transferred to the Funds Commission in 1994. The fund was established by Chloe B. Sargent in memory of her mother, exclusively for enhancements to the North Park Branch Library. For this fund, only the income earned annually may be used for this purpose. This fund has quarterly distributions using a 3-year average of the fund's market value. The quarterly distributions are 1.25% or 5% annually of the average. Next, we have the Los Penasquitos Canyon Preserve Fund, which was transferred to the Funds Commission in 1996. The funds were a result of a land exchange in 1986. Approximately $1 million was received for the ongoing maintenance and enhancement of the preserve. Therefore, only the investment earnings may be used for this purpose. This fund also has quarterly distributions. Again, using a 3-year average of the fund's market value, the quarterly distributions are 1.25% or 5% annually of the average. The Gladys Edna Peters Memorial Fund was transferred to the Funds Commission in 1997. The funds are for the benefit of the Rancho Bernardo Branch Library to be used exclusively for the procurement and maintenance of large print books and magazines as related to equipment and supplies. Again, the distributions are calculated using the same methodology as previously described. The quarterly distributions are 1.25% and the calculated average or 5% annually. The Jane Cameron Fund was transferred to the Funds Commission in 2009. The funds are to be used exclusively for the expansion and improvement of the La Jolla Branch Library or the improvement or maintenance of its collection. This fund does not have regular distributions. The Philip L. Green Memorial Fund was transferred to the Funds Commission in 2019. The funds are to be used exclusively to enhance city funds budgeted to purchase, plant, replace, and maintain trees and shrubs in Balboa Park. This fund does not have regular distributions. Lastly, we have the Mount Hope Cemetery Perpetuity Fund, which was established by the City Charter, Section 55 in 1931, for the purpose of preserving and maintaining all public burial grounds and cemeteries. As required by the City Charter, 20% of net proceeds from the sale of all cemetery lots are deposited into the fund, leaving the remaining 80%, plus all investment earnings derived from the fund, available to support operating expenses of the cemetery. The City Charter does not allow for the use of the principal of the fund and requires that investments are made in income-producing securities, which drives the asset allocation of this fund toward emphasis on bonds and dividend-paying stocks. The target asset allocation for this fund is stated in terms of risk. 66% is allocated to risk control assets such as bonds, cash, etc., and 34% is allocated to risk assets such as stocks, real estate, etc. This chart summarizes the income derived by the Mount Hope Cemetery Investment Fund for the last several fiscal years. The income derived from investments, along with the remaining 80% of lot sales, are available to cover cemetery maintenance costs. As in past years, the general fund continues to subsidize any shortfall in revenue to cover all operating expenses of the cemetery. The average annual subsidy provided by the general fund from the fiscal year 2020 through 2024 was approximately $420,000. We also want to make the committee and public aware that we provide ongoing performance reports on a quarterly basis to the city on the city's Funds Commission website, and the link is provided on this slide. I'll now pass it over to Ms. Bonnie to discuss the performance of the cemetery fund, followed by Mr. Nip to discuss the performance of the remaining funds.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As you can see, as of August 31st, 2024, the total size of the fund was $12.6 million. We are measuring performance since inception. So if you look on the far right-hand side, we began investments in August of 2001. If you go through the performance numbers, you will see both the gross and net performance of the fund. The net performance is net of all product fees that are embedded in the portfolio itself, as well as advisory fees that are paid to Northern Trust. As this prior speaker noted, the purpose of this portfolio is to generate income, and thus the allocation is focused on primarily risk-safe securities in the form of bonds and cash. The balance, around 35%, is invested in the equity markets, which provide growth in the portfolio, but also have greater risk. The 1, 3, and 5-year numbers are probably the best reflection of how the portfolio has been doing. I would focus on the 5-year numbers, which is a sort of a realistic target horizon between 5 and 10 years for this kind of a portfolio. The net returns have fluctuated between 3.5% and 4.5% over that time frame. The one negative that all investment portfolios experienced was in 2022, when post-COVID, we saw inflation and growth escalate, and thus the Federal Reserve and central banks around the world increased interest rates in order to mitigate the impact of inflation. We now see that in reverse. Unfortunately, 2022 was a negative year, therefore, for both equity markets and fixed income markets, given the precipitous rise in interest rates. For those of us who follow what's going on in the economy, we know that the Fed has now turned the corner and has started to reduce the Fed funds rate, which should trickle through the economy. What has happened in your portfolio is that 66% that is focused on bonds, which was hit hard in 2022, is now yielding approximately 4.5% of in interest income. Similarly, your equity portfolio is producing around 3.5% to 4% in income. And so the portfolio, from our perspective, is now stabilized in terms of its ability to provide the income necessary to cover the operating expenses of the cemetery. I'll leave it there unless there are any questions.
And now we'll turn it over to Jeff Knipp to present the performance for the remaining funds.
Okay, thank you, and good morning. So you can see here the market value of these various funds, ranging from about $467,000 for the Peters Fund up to over $8 million for the Cameron Fund. As John mentioned, these are all operated under the same investment policy. You can see at the very bottom the weights of the overall policy index. So 40% US stocks, 25% international stocks, 35% bonds. You'll note the returns. So Allison was just pointing out 5-year returns for the cemetery fund. If you look at the 5-year returns here, these are much higher due to the fact that these have a lot more exposure to stocks and less exposure to bonds. So that's driven those higher returns versus the cemetery fund. These funds do not operate under the income restrictions that the cemetery fund has. So far this year, through August, you can see the year-to-date return column up about 10.5% in each of the funds. September was also a good month, so those numbers will be even higher through the end of September. The next page just shows calendar years for the last 10 years or so. And this is really useful just to see the volatility year to year. Allison talked about 2022, where both stocks and bonds were down double digits, pretty significant, and I think the worst ever year for the bond market. Things have recovered quite well since then. You can see a nice bounce back in 2023, and this year has continued to be good. And if you go back further, again, you can see, some good years, some bad years. That's very typical year-to-year volatility. These are long-term investments. We have distributions, as John said, from 3 of the funds, quarterly distributions. And we always look to take money from the areas that have done the best and might be a little bit over their target weights. So we keep everything in line with the policy targets. Again, everything is operating as it should, and happy to answer any questions.
So that concludes the prepared remarks that the commission has today, and we're happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much. All right, let's first hear from public comment.
Thank you. We have received 2 speaker slips from individuals in chambers. We will take these 2 speakers first before we move to the virtual queue. Joyce and Yada, please approach the lectern. You'll have 2 minutes, and you'll be followed by Cesar Javier.
Thank you, Natalie. Joyce and Yada, District 3. Great detailed presentation. Did you feel it reverberate all the way up to heaven and come back down to all of you? I did. San Diego Funds Commission, thank you. How old is it? I didn't see that. I'll have to look that up. The makeup of the commission is very solid. Thank you. 7 trust funds, wonderful. Here is what these dear people of San Diego cared about. Memorials, libraries, 4. Nature preserves, 1. Care of burial grounds, 1. Reading materials and related equipment, 1. Trees, 1. Chair Lee, the budget. This is one big reason why the public at budget review hearings speak so loudly in unison for our libraries. 4 of the 7 memorials are for libraries. And love and a thank you, a big thank you to the people named and the ones that provided all these assets and so forth to create these legacies. We love you so much, and love to all. Thank you for a great meeting.
Thank you. Cesar Javier, please approach the lectern.
Thank you. Theory and practice are not dovetailed. The money is now in the hands of the city, administration and management. My professors in the East inculcated in us that governments do not make money business. They have their budgets, and you have to put that budget into zero in the delivery of public good. Money. I am afraid, I am fearful of my tax being paid to Uncle Sam because of mishandling. The presentation shows us figures. I just would like to know money saved, put into good, public good delivery, and the money wasted. Because the rule says that is the rule. But time has changed. We have people dying. We have people getting sick. Is it not honest and morally upright to change the rule and get some precious wealth to sustain the survivability of humans? The same purpose of those trustees.
Thank you. This does conclude your time, and this will conclude in-person public testimony. We will now move to the virtual queue. I've started the 5-minute timer for all those to indicate that they wish to speak to item 3. We have one hand raised. The original, please begin. You'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is an interesting item. Not like these questions are ever going to be answered, but with the volatility of the market and whatnot, I mean, what's in place if something happened so badly that, the money was lost that was invested? What would happen then? And who determines, per fund how it is dealt with? Is it the people that gave the money? Do they have a say in that? Or is it just the commission that gets to decide how the investments go? And I'm surprised there isn't, kind of some information as well on what the funds get spent on and how, for improvements, say with the library or the preserve or, even the cemetery or whatever it is that these are dealing with. Is there, kind of an accounting of how that money is spent per year? If it is per year, or if this is just continually going back into the bucket to just get more and more money. And do you ever take from these funds to go to other things? And where's the oversight in that to make sure that it's staying with like the library fund? If it has to do with that, is it possible that it would go to other libraries outside of these? Yeah, so again, I'm wondering like where that all comes from, who determines those things, and is it the library that gets to determine how the funds are spent? Do they give some kind of, are they just given money? Or do they have to say this is what we need to do to improve or enhance or maintain this facility? Do they have to ask you for it, or is it just given to them on a regular basis to make sure that they can do that in a timely manner?
Thank you. And Council President, this concludes public comment on item 3.
All right, thank you so much. We'll kick things off with Council President Pro Tem LaCava.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the report. And let me start out by saying it is refreshing when we get public comment that actually gives us something to chew on. So let me chew on a little bit. The charter section says the commission shall have supervision and control over all the funds. And the report only seems to be about the investment, which of course is important, how we're actually managing the investments, maintaining the principal, generating the distributions that are called for in the creation of the original fund. But I too am curious about who is watching when there is a withdrawal or a distribution, that the funds are actually being used in the manner dictated by the original benefactor. Who does that? When do we get a report on that? How do we track that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember LaCava. So the Funds Commission just strictly manages the investment of the funds only and does not decide on how the funds are actually expended. in its custody. The um, the the restrictions are established with their creation, whether that's with the municipal code, be it the cemetery fund, or by council resolution that is put forth and put in place based on the guidance from the actual bequeathment of those funds to the city. So as an example, the large print books and things like that, that was specified specifically in the bequest from the donor. Regarding when those funds are actually expended, they are held by the Funds Commission until that request is made by the city, by city staff, by the respective departments that are the benefactors of those funds. So for instance, for the library funds, we would need a request from the library director for those funds to be expended. And that obviously follows into the budgeting requirements as well that are put forth by council.
So, and this may not be an appropriate follow-up with the treasurer's office, because you are the manager of the money and the cash flow, et cetera. But I wonder about who actually tracks whether the money that is, again, either a withdrawal or a distribution is actually being used consistently with it. So does it depend on the public and the council to watch budget items as they come forward and say, oh, $500 is coming from this fund? Is it actually being used with the limits of that fund? Who actually tracks that? And is there ever a singular report that actually says, here's what these individuals wanted, here's what the city agreed to actually do, and here's a report out that in fact, because I would argue that the charter does impose that on the Funds Commission to actually do that when it says supervise and control. I think people assume that the commission is actually doing that additional task as well. So I will follow up and offline on that, but I think that's an important question that we may have lost track of. I guess we currently have one vacancy on the commission. Briefly, has that been pretty easy to fill? I know quorum is always a challenge for any citizen board on there. Does it compromise the work of the commission to have the banker position open?
Yeah, so again, good question. So fortunately, thanks to the Office of Boards and Commissions, we really appreciate their work. Director Darby, Chido Warren Darby, apologies, and her work on getting that banking official position filled. That was done just this past April. So we currently do have a full commission for the first time in quite a while. We do, however, have one seat that is being served on an expired term, but he is able to continue serving in that capacity until his replacement is selected and filled.
All right, yeah, I make that question just to know the integrity of the commission and its work. Some of these positions are very, very difficult to fill. It's difficult to find someone for some of this nuts and bolts things. I know I've chased a lot of colleagues to try to encourage them to serve, and it can be difficult. So I appreciate the ongoing effort. The other question I'll put out there, which you may not be able to answer, but our city attorney raised the question of whether the city attorney should be an ex officio member of the commission, especially given the commission's current bent to be only about investment, and what role the city attorney plays and whether that's an appropriate position for them to fill. Any thoughts you want to share on that?
Yeah, it's again another good question. So I can't speak to the intent of when the Funds Commission was originally established back in the 60s and why the city attorney was appointed to be on the commission ex officio. But what I can say is having that position as well as the city treasurer position on the Funds Commission definitely has helped us to meet quorum requirements over the past decade, when a lot of those positions, the other positions, were vacant. So whether that be the city attorney continuing to serve ex officio on the Funds Commission or another position, I definitely think having those two ex officio positions required on the commission definitely helps the commission meet quorum requirements.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the candor in your answer because that is a balance in terms of how we actually allow the commission to meet on a regular basis, as you said, meeting quorum. And that is a charter issue, so any changes would require pretty substantial effort. So this is an information item. I'll be kind of looking into whether the commission should play a bigger role, especially if you have the city attorney on the commission in terms of whether the funds are actually being used. I don't have any reason to believe that the funds are not being used appropriately. And to the other question raised by the public, to me, there is no more sacred compact than a beneficiary setting money to create an endowment to be used for very specific purposes. And we should not even give a moment's thought to use it for any other purpose, no matter how dire, how tragic some of the other conditions that we as a city need to deal with. Those are really sacred compacts in my mind, and not a penny should be used for anything other than what the benefactor said it must be used for. So I appreciate the integrity of that component as well. So this is an information item. I appreciate the presentation and the responses. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. Appreciate what you had to say there. I will share my appreciation to you all for acting in accordance with Council Policy 00000-26 and being proactive and reaching out to our office to provide this update. We always appreciate that. I appreciate Council President Pro Tem LaCava checking in on the status of vacancies. And I want to say thank you for your work to make sure that these funds are not only protected, but also that significant returns are being brought back as well. So thank you again for all the work that you do on a regular basis and for bringing this forward today. I don't see any additional requests to speak to this item or ask questions, Council President Pro Tem.
Sorry about that. You said something that kind of reminded me that was brought up by the public. The investment strategy, the 60-40, 55-45, whatever I've forgotten already what your split is. Who decides that strategy, whether to be more aggressive or to be more conservative in your investment strategy? Is that the decision the commission makes?
Yes, absolutely. So any changes to the investment policy statement are typically recommended by the investment advisors, and any changes to the investment policy do require a vote of the Funds Commission to enact those changes to the investment policy.
Okay, and that doesn't come up to either the mayor or the council. Yep. That's internally to the commission. Okay.
Correct.
But I believe the Funds Commission does adhere to the city's larger policy about not investing in fossil fuels and related industries?
That is a separate investment policy statement that is specific to the city's pooled assets. They're two separate investment policy statements.
So if we wanted to apply that to the Funds Commission, we would have to take a separate action?
Correct. And we can absolutely follow back up with your office regarding that. I believe we had a similar question at the last presentation, but we can absolutely follow up.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. All right, with that, we are at the end of our agenda, and we will adjourn this meeting until the next meeting of the Rules Committee on Wednesday, October 30th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.